Good morning. Thanks for joining in. We're going to go ahead and get started. So glad that you're joining us this morning. If you're in Atlanta, it's a little bit of a rainy Tuesday, but glad we can kick it off. Welcome to Off the Record. I'm Sarah Saxner, Vice President of Strategic Growth at 352, and your host for today. Before jumping in with Melissa, which is I know the reason why you all came in today, I want to lay a little bit of groundwork and cover some housekeeping items. 352 is a growth firm, meaning we help others navigate uncertainty in pursuit of value creation. We engage middle market and enterprise companies to find new customers and markets, build and scale new digital products and services, and sometimes we help them launch new ventures. Some of you are regulars and some of you are new. So for all of you, welcome, like I said. We've been hosting Off the Record for the past 4 years as a way to connect the business and innovation community and learn from industry leaders. So really glad you could be here with us today. We'll be taking questions in the chat below, so go ahead and feel free to open up your chat now. I'd like to ask everyone to drop in one thing that they'd like to get from today's discussion, just so that we can always refer back to it and make sure we're hitting some points. Let's take a minute to check out what's on everyone's mind. Oh, we've got a few Hawks fans.
Woohoo! Go Hawks.
Us too. Melissa a little bit, you know. Can go ahead and we'll refer back to it. It's no problem. So for this, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Melissa. Melissa Proctor, CMO of the Atlanta Hawks, a creative, a strategist, brand builder extraordinaire, newly titled author, mom, and in my opinion, just all around badass as our guest today. So glad to have you, Melissa.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'd love for us to start out the conversation today, having you introduce yourself to the audience. You tell your story better than I ever could, so would love to turn that over to you and kind of extend that warmth and all of the good things that you bring to the world.
Oh, I'm so sweet. Thank you. Well, hey everybody, I'm Melissa Proctor, Chief Marketing Officer of both the Atlanta Hawks and State Farm Arena. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, born and raised, and started out my career as an artist, some of my artwork behind me there. And around age 15, decided I wanted to become the first female coach in the NBA because my mom said I have to get a job and whatever I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And that's what I thought I wanted to do at 15. So I started writing a bunch of letters to the Heat and ended up getting on the court as the first ball girl ever for the team. And so, you know, fast forward, I went to Wake Forest for undergrad, was a communications major and a studio art minor when they were on an art scholarship, and left Wake and ended up here in Atlanta working for Turner Broadcasting, where I was for about 11 years. I left for a year to go to graduate school in London to focus on brand strategy specifically, and came back to Atlanta and got to work on everything from the rebrand of Court TV to True TV, awesome digital health and wellness startup that Turner launched called Upwave. And then things shifted, the world changed a little bit, and then I ended up coming over to the Hawks as a VP of brand strategy. And the world evolved very quickly. I saw someone ask a question about new ownership. One of my roles there was onboarding new ownership, which was a crazy experience, but really awesome. We have a tremendous ownership team. And then after about 2 years with the Hawks, I got promoted to Chief Marketing Officer. And really now my role is expansive, everything from obviously advertising and promotion, in-game operations, so all of the experience in the arena, our merchandise and all of our retail, both our in-store within the arena, as well as our e-com business, everything we do out in the community from a CSR perspective, as well as our street teams, basketball camps and programs, the clinics we would normally run all over the city. Now we have Hawks at Home, which is a digital component that we have online. And you name it, we're doing it. And so it's a really exciting time. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the blend and like this idea of the creativity being like at the core of everything that you do, especially in business and how you show up. And I'm a little bit curious. Did you know what success looked like to you back when you were 15 and decided to be the first, you know, or wanting to be the first NBA head coach that was a female, or how have you been able to define that? And I'd love to hear a little bit about your trajectory in that way.
A really great question. And I was actually just talking to my dad this morning, and he recently read my book. It took him about a month, I don't know. And he said, you know, Melissa, you didn't talk about the advice I always gave you. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, as long as you do your best, that, you can't do any more, that I'm proud of you. And I believe it is in there somewhere, but it's absolutely, I think, the way that I've always benchmarked success from a child. And it was really, when you give it your all and when you don't. And in that regard, if I was in school and I came home with a C or a D in a class, my mom and my dad be like, did you do your best? And I'm like, I studied, I suck at taking tests. It just is what it is. And they're like, all right, if that's the best you can do, I am so happy for this C or this D. And I think that really drove me, because it wasn't just about the final result. It's really about giving it your all in whatever capacity that is. And so I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. I didn't know what success looked like. I think for me, even getting a job in the NBA was success, because that was the benchmark that was set for me. Said, if you want to get a job, it has to be in whatever you want to do for the rest of your life. I wanted to work in the NBA. So the director for my mom was like, okay, go get a job in the NBA. She's from Belize. I don't even think she knew what NBA meant. But it was more like, I laid down the gauntlet. Let's see how you respond.
That's super cool. I remember at one point, you talking about, we're going to get into values later, which I'm so excited about. But I remember something from our pre-call where you were like, I just want to make dope shit, and I love that. It's your experiences and how you leverage that and use it as your guiding light too is pretty cool. It sounds like your parents have had a ton of influence on you.
They have. I mean, I'm an only child. When I grew up, I have an older brother from my father who lives in Jamaica, who's much older than me. But, they did. And it's interesting because I always say, I just want to make dope shit. And I think that just goes to the heart of, I love creativity. And I think in my past as an artist, people just saw the creativity in a visual art form. And I feel like now as my career has evolved and I've learned more around business and business strategy, it's almost like, how can I take a creative approach to solving unique business challenges? And so people are like, oh, do you still paint? And I try to, but normally I'm just painting with my 6-year-old, and that's the extent of my art career these days. But I still feel like I have to utilize a ton of creativity and just ways to navigate, whether it's difficult challenges or a pandemic, and how do we approach business in a unique way. And so I'm really proud of the work that we've done, myself over my career, as well as with the Hawks, because I really think, as you can see with our brand, like we really had to be creative. So we have a team that's not necessarily winning on the court, but really excelling in the community and doing good things as a brand. It's important. And a lot of that takes that creative and strategic effort.
I love that. The blend between left and right brain and how all of it manifests. I'm curious too. So talking about the Atlanta Hawks, can you tell us more about who they are and how you show up for your people and the brand and really our community every day? I'd love to dig in there.
Oh, absolutely. So when I first started my first day on the job, our CEO, Steve Koonin, said, Melissa, I need your help building this brand. And the first year I lived in Atlanta, I was actually a ball girl on the court mopping up sweat for the Hawks, while I also interned at Turner Broadcasting. And so, my relationship with the Hawks goes back pretty far. And in building that brand, the first thing we had to do was look at every piece of data that we could get our hands on. And it was, television ratings, census data, past ticket sales data, you name it, we were looking at it to really try to define, where we were as kind of the state of the world. And we realized that Atlanta was really apathetic towards the Hawks, but really passionate about basketball. So we knew there was an opportunity to build a brand, but then we found this gap or this disconnect from the time that Dominique Wilkins was traded. There was like this, lull a little bit where the team wasn't investing a lot into the community, but there wasn't necessarily that core connection with what we call the next generation of Atlantans. And so we realized that if we knew anybody came from New York or from Boston, if you're a Celtics fan, it doesn't matter what I do as an Atlanta Hawk marketer, I could not get you to replace your passion for the Celtics. But if you moved to Atlanta, you probably had children here. And that gives us an opportunity to be the best team for your kid. And so we really looked at this next generation Atlantic kind of fan base or audience and said, how do we tap into that and grow that over generation, really a generational fan building strategy. And so that's been a lot of the work. And the whole idea of True to Atlanta, you may have seen as our hashtag and our mantra, it's really around knowing that there are a lot of people who've come to Atlanta, myself included, and have made Atlanta home. And so because of that, there's an authenticity in that, when you come here, you can be anything, do anything, the idea of Southern hospitality, but the Atlanta is unique to every individual. So True to Atlanta can mean many things to different people, but that was the goal. And when we did, Phillips Arena to make it State Farm Arena, we did a lot of work into how do we make this the most Atlanta arena ever. So if you pick this building up and put it in Wyoming, people would not understand most of it. So by partnering with the different vendors that we did in terms of like having Old Lady Gang, or even with Zach Brown band, you know, partnering in the building, or even Killer Mike having his swag shop, barbershop inside the arena. All of that was how do we tie it to true to Atlanta? You know, Piece Up, A-Town Down murals, working with local artists throughout the building. That's a lot of what our brand is. And we really thought that if we can connect it to Atlanta and to the community of Atlanta, that we would ultimately win, not just with the city, but with the next generation of Atlantans coming in as well.
I love that. And it's something that you feel, and I think it's something that can resonate with, to your point, you know, people from all walks of life and, you know, all backgrounds, and whether or not you're born and bred here or, you know, you moved here for a job. I personally remember a few years ago when I first moved to Atlanta, coming to some of the Hawks games. It was just, it was really cool. I think you guys do it right as far as like fan experience for sure.
That's the goal. I mean, we have an amazing team, and they have raised the bar from a fan experience perspective. So much so, I think last season we had more NBA teams coming to visit us here to see our building and our experience and how we did things differently. And so super proud of the team, you know, that I get to work with every day. And, you know, once we're out of this pandemic and can open our building safely to have fans in, we're just going to continue to raise that bar because that's the goal.
Yeah, super cool. On the point of just around like true to Atlanta, what is Atlanta for you?
Atlanta for me, and man, it's so many different things. I have built this amazing kind of network group of people that I've connected with through Turner, just from being out and about in the Caribbean community. My family's West Indian. My mom was from Belize, as I mentioned. My dad is from Jamaica. And so I have this wealth of culture, you know, all around. It's going out to Buford Highway with some of my homies and doing, you know, Korean barbecue and all the rest. Like, I love what Atlanta has become for me over time. I think initially I really, you know, wasn't sure, didn't know, and it's really through relationships. Atlanta is very much a relationship building place. But when you find your people, and I think you find your space. I live in West Midtown, which is the coolest part of Atlanta. I may be biased. But you know, that's my Atlanta. And I think now that I've had my daughter and I see kind of the world through her eyes, she's a Georgia peach. You know, she was born and raised here. And so I'm very curious of what her perception and perspective of the city will be. But she is officially like the biggest Hawks fan ever. And I love it.
That's I can imagine she gets like an inside scoop and probably thinks she's, you know, thebomb.com.
Going to games since she was 2 months old, so that's all she knows.
It's in her blood. That's awesome. Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit because I think some of this is naturally parlaying into some other pieces. So there have been some experiences, as you've shared along the way, you know, working for different companies, but at the core, there's still your values. There's still Melissa, and you bring that with you no matter where you go, whether you're leading from within, leading from a positional structure, right? I'm curious if we could talk a little bit more around your guiding principles and how that kind of affects how you live your life every day. How have you defined your values? I'd love to hear more about what those mean for you.
No, I mean, it's a great question. And in my book, I really kind of dig into the value of guiding principles. And when I was really junior in my career, I had a mentor that kind of mentioned just the idea of defining what those values are for you, or the things that you hold dear, or your non-negotiables, and using it almost as a filter for decisions that you make throughout your career. I know there are a lot of people who are like, I know when I was a kid, I wanted to be a doctor. I went to med school. I did everything I need to do, and I'm a doctor now. That's awesome. I did not have that path at all. And because I was always so open to wherever God in the universe was guiding me, it was like I needed something to kind of root myself in. And so I looked at these guiding principles as a way to do that. So for myself, I had 5 that I defined. And a lot of it came over time, and I had to live a little bit in order to really make sure that this was my core. But, you know, the very first one is, I've mentioned it already, being creative and strategic is critical for me. And I've been in jobs where I was strictly a creative. I've been in jobs that were 100% strategic. And I realized that the balance between the two is what my sweet spot was. So it was my strength, but also what I enjoyed most. The second is the ability to add new tools to my personal toolbox. No matter what I'm doing, if I can do it in my sleep, it's not the thing for me. Like, I get bored really, really easily. So I almost look at myself as an agency of one. And so if I'm an agency and I'm building out capabilities presentation, if I'm taking on a new role, I need to be able to add a new capability in doing it. And so that's really important. The third one is my mother was horrible with money when I was growing up. Like bill collectors calling, and I hated it. And so I made a promise to myself that I would always pay my bills on time, maybe ahead. And after I had my daughter, I wanted to make sure that whatever I did, I was in a position where I can help invest in her future. So in the future, that may mean having stake in a company or whichever, but the idea of some sort of financial independence is critical. The fourth one, no matter what I do, I have to be able to bring my entire self to work every day, to your point. My background, my history, my culture, I have locks, I have a nose ring, and I don't deviate. I know people talk about code switching and the importance of that, and the way that I talk to you is how I talk to my kids, how I talk to my boss. And so that's me. And if I can't do that where I am, then that's not someplace I need to be. And I think the final one for me is the idea of work-life harmony. You know, we talk about balance and how some things are balanced, some things are not. But I recognize in my life, I was a caregiver for my mother most of my adult life. And so after she passed away, I'm now taking care of my daughter. But if there's a day that I need to leave and go to, you know, her school for a party at noon, I need to be able to go and do that and have the flexibility, but know when I'm at work or in the office, I'm giving 100%. But those are my 5 guiding principles. And I think as I've navigated my career, it's been helpful in that I can use that when even talking to someone, say, hey, this is me. If these line up with you, then we can be cool. If they don't, I will awesomely respect that and have to go another direction. But it's really been valuable.
I can imagine it's allowed you to be a little bit more open to the journey, not knowing, you know, what lies ahead, and having that that rootedness, that groundedness is something too that, you know, it gives you boundaries, and it gives
exactly.
we always say, like, within innovation and within creativity, you know, having those boundaries is actually what instills more of that, and allows more of that to manifest. So I think that's really cool. I do want to clarify something just for anyone on the call who may not know what code switching is. Would you mind explaining what that means?
Sure. I mean, I think in some cultures in general, not even just, you know, Black culture, but
Yeah.
the idea of feeling like you have to almost assimilate with whoever you're in the group with and act as if you're a member of that group just in order to be accepted or to succeed is something that a lot of people have done over years. And I think, you know, and I won't say there's anything wrong with it, because I think people have to do things in different ways based on themselves and their personality. And I know many people who do, they have their home persona and they have their work persona, and never the two shall meet. And that's fine. And I suck at things like that. And that's not necessarily ever been me. Probably early in my career. And actually I do have a story. I remember my first year at Turner as an intern. I remember going to work. I had an amazing group of people that I worked with. I was the only African-American in my department. There were some other assistants from other groups that I knew of, but, you know, I didn't get invited to the lunches or, you know, the happy hours after work. And I didn't necessarily think that I fit in to the group. And I remember one day going and speaking to the head of the network. And I said, you know, asked me how my internship was going. And I explained it. And I said, you know, I really don't think I fit in. And I was like, well, what do you mean? I was like, I feel like I need to go shop at Banana Republic and have a dog, because everyone had like similar things. And it was like, absolutely not. You know, you are here because of what you bring to the table, your culture, your background. You know, I designed a magazine to get my internship at Turner. He's like, everyone saw that magazine and we knew who you were. And that's what we needed within our company. And so I never think that it was the best advice I could have gotten that stage of my career. You know, don't deviate from who you are, feeling like you have to fit in with others just to, you know, maintain this job. Like, if you don't bring who you are to work every day, you're doing us a disservice. And I think that was so critical, and it really helped me understanding that there isn't a need to switch codes or become more like other just to fit in, but by being myself was absolutely enough, more than enough.
I think that's so important, such an important message. And I also think that, you know, you have the autonomy and the choices to be able, if there are spaces and people that don't respect that, then it's obviously very clearly not the place for, you know, you can make that choice whether or not you want to be there or not.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult when you're a junior in your career as well, because sometimes you're like, all right, I just need this job, or I need to get this experience. And so I definitely think that kind of what got you here won't get you there, but you're able to learn yourself through those experiences and understand, you know, what's the best fit for you.
And having those bosses, managers, those mentors, people to like almost give you that permission to,
Yeah.
either way, I think is super critical. In thinking of the piece where you talked about growing and learning, that's something incredibly important to me. Just as being a lifelong learner, I love soaking things up. I'm curious if there were anything, or talking about this like agency of one, right? We've got a few marketing questions in the chat, which I'll get to in a second. But have there been any places for you, aside from getting that experience, that has really helped to elevate or to explore, or like be a resource to constantly add those tools to your toolbox? Is there thought there, or is it more like opportunistic, as you're like, oh, I need to be able to do graphic design, so therefore I'm going to seek this out, or the people who do this well?
I think it's a combination, because sometimes I think I've learned in ways that I didn't anticipate. So I'll say initially it was very much around, do the job you want before you have it. I was interested in brand strategy. I didn't have a job in brand strategy, so I went to grad school to learn more about brand strategy. And then after that, I came back to Turner, and there were no brand jobs. And so I was able to connect with a guy that had these shirts that said "Free hugs, we all need one." And I thought the shirts were the coolest thing, so I bought one online. And when you buy the shirt, he would personally email everyone to thank them for his vision and letting everybody know that they matter. I was like, oh man, like pulled on my heartstrings. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, I want to help you grow your brand. And I'm thinking this is like a corporation, or turns out he's like one guy living in an apartment off of Northridge in 400. And so we ended up becoming friends. He's actually from Miami, and I didn't even know, the same neighborhood I was from.
Oh,
and
cool.
we ended up growing this brand over years. I became his director of brand strategy, designed business cards with my art skills, put together presentations, found brands to connect him with to help grow sales, but also that were good, alignments for the brand. And it was amazing, the doors that opened. We ended up doing a Free Hugs Day in Denver, Colorado with a fan of his that had breast cancer, and then did a breast cancer walk after, having school kids make signs that we held up. We had a free hugs opportunity in the Netherlands at Leiden University, where he was invited to bring a guest to go and speak on the power of the herd, or people gathering together to do good in the world. And none of these things would have happened if I didn't just kind of raise my hand and say, hey, let me help. And ultimately that opportunity led me to be able to create a brand partnership between Free Hugs and TBS, which I believe ultimately got me a brand job within Turner Broadcasting. Had nothing to do with the company itself, but it was almost creating the opportunity to do the job I wanted outside of a corporate world, put it on my resume, didn't get paid a dime for it, was probably the best brand experience job of my life, because I was really able to do things in a low risk environment where I could still pay my bills. So I'll say, I think for me, that idea of doing the job you want before you have it is critical. And then other times, I remember setting up informational meetings, wanting to learn from people, because either what they did sounded cool or I was intrigued. And I remember one in particular was on media planning. And so I thought I wanted to be a media planner. When I was early in my career, I was like, oh, that sounds so cool. I had no idea what the hell media planning was. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up setting up a informational interview with someone in Turner's media group. And I sat with her, shadowed her for half a day. And most of the day we spent crunching numbers and GRPs on an Excel spreadsheet. And I was like, oh my God, I could never do this. And it was the most insightful half day ever. I think at the end, AMC or someone came in to pitch, and they had popcorn and candy and got tickets to the movies. And I was like, oh, that was fun. But no.
Yeah.
So I think it really is a combination, but going out and seeking it, even through reading books, it's just, I think if there's something that catches my attention, I just am curious by nature. So I want to learn more. And through that digging, I'll either find that I love it or it's not the thing.
Yeah, curiosity, so crucial. When I think about it too, there are a few call outs there, right? Around raising your hand, taking the initiative. I think especially now more than ever, that's important. And it seems like people are really receptive to that. Just thinking through like informational interviews or coffee dates, whether it's on Zoom or not, like I found that people are really willing to share what they know to people who want to learn more about them and more about, the skills that they have or like their path. So I think that's a pretty neat call out too. And it's also easier to create a job or to network and figure that out when you don't need a job. And so, whether you're in a current position where you're looking or, you think you may want to make that change, I think going through those conversations and also being willing to figure out what you don't want to do as much as what you do want to do is just as valuable.
Yeah, and I'll say one quick thing on that. It's just even the idea of networking. I also realized really early in my career, and I'm glad I learned it then, not now, was just the ability to be an asset on someone's time and not a liability.
Mm.
And I see it now more than ever, even in my stage of my career, where people just want, I want to meet you. I want you to give me a job. I want you to tell me how you did it so I can do it too. It's very I. And at the end of the day, there's very little that is, how do you help me? And not even in a selfish way, but to the point of, it's easier to look for a job when you don't need one. If it always is like, hey, so I had 30-minute coffee with you, like now I need a job. So like, I don't know you, haven't built a real relationship. And so one of the things that I did early on, I had a meeting with this woman named Jennifer Dorian, who's an amazing marketer, brand strategist. And I, like, after 10 minutes of talking to her, I was like, I want to work for you. And she's like, everyone wants to work for me. And I talk about her a lot in my book because, like, meeting her was just so critical in my career, just even in mentorship. And I remember asking her, I said, like, what are your points of pain? Like, what's keeping you up at night? What are you working on? And she told me about this traumatic occasion kit. And she was the head of branding for TNT at the time. And they were trying to get the ad sales teams out of New York to sell the network. But the network at the time was like Law and Order, a lot of reruns, a 55 plus demo. And the people who were selling it were like 25 to 35. So they didn't even connect with the network. So they weren't selling it as well as they could. So she came up with this amazing idea of creating these kits because she learned that most of them were living out their lives first. So, getting married for the first time, buying their first house, having their first child. So she said, if we can put TNT in critical parts of their lives that have meaning and emotion, maybe they'll have a different connection to our brand. And I was like, that is so cool. So I was like, what are you putting in the kits? She's like, I have no idea. That's what I'm working through. So I literally went home that night and I sketched a Here Comes Drama baby onesie, a drama king and drama queen robe for when they get married. Drama is wedding picture frame, wine charms with the elements of drama for someone who just buys their new home. And literally the next day I go back to the office and I share these designs with her. This is pencil on like computer paper sketches.
Sure.
And she was so blown away. She's like, these are amazing because they're not just creative, but they're strategic in that we can actually manufacture them and, reproduce them in mass. And so it's not just kind of art for art's sake. And I think at that point, she saw me in a different light because everyone comes in and says, hey, I want information. I want to learn more about you. But no one ever comes back with a gift, and nor a valuable gift, something that was useful. And they actually created everything I designed and sent them in those kits months later. And so I think from there, we built a mutual respect and relationship. And even through grad school, I would call and ask, hey, what books, can I read? And I would send her things that I'd seen. And I just so realize now the importance of being an asset on someone's time versus a liability. It changes the game.
Yeah, that's such a great story. Oops. Are you hearing any echo? Or is that just me? Okay. I was hearing feedback in my Zoom. So who knows what's going on with Zoom today. No, I really, I value that story. It's like a giving more than you take, especially on the front of the relationship and doing what you can, especially, I'm sure Jennifer really appreciated that from the value of like her career and her team and seeing you in a different light. And, I'm sure that's something she hasn't forgotten. Because it is a unique approach, and I wish more people did stuff like that.
Me too.
Yeah. In thinking, I want to kind of take a second and look at our chat because we are getting some interaction from the audience. So it may be a little popcorny, if you will, but want to make sure that we're engaging as much as possible. Would so much rather do this in person, but here we are. So there's a question from Jessica around what marketing channels would you recommend for startups with limited funds to get their brand out?
Oh man, Jessica,
right?
Social all day. I mean, I know it's the lame answer and it's the marketing channel of the century, but without a dime, you could create so much noise and chatter and, fan base over everything else. And people talk about the death of email a lot, but I still see a ton of value in email. We as the Hawks and our team and, creating those lists are critical. And I am a huge fan, and people always laugh at me when I say this. It's juxtaposed worlds. Like, I love looking at different worlds and finding unique ways to do it. If I could market basketball games on Fandango, I absolutely would, but they won't let me put games on there. If I could look at Open Table and have every restaurant in our arena as a marketing tool in an environment where people don't expect it, I absolutely would. If you get on a Clubhouse and find unique ways, I'm all about looking at where the people are and finding ways, depending on what your business is, to be in there in a relevant way. To me, that is all the success in the world, because the buzz and the chatter and the press that you may get from even using a tool like Snapchat in a new and unique way could be more beneficial and award-winning and everything else when people wouldn't expect it at all.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to build on that. So where the people are, right? I would just kind of chat with Jessica around wanting to understand who your customer is, and like really getting in there. It's something that we at 352 value so much, is that user-centered design, and making sure that we're not just building for building's sake, right? But like building for your customer to ultimately drive value and offer that value. I can imagine that, you know, what works creatively on one channel for one company is certainly different for another. So yeah, I definitely, I think that's a great question. I also see that there's a question. We'll get to your question towards the end, Russ, just around books and such that have been influential to you, Melissa. But Damien, who's actually a 352 employee, asked a question wanting to understand more around the kind of support you have around you. What does your team look like? How do you work with agencies? Sounds like you have an amazing job, which I agree. But yeah, would love to know a little bit more of that structure, and then we can dig in more to the work that you do every day.
For sure. I mean, you know, I think what's interesting is the perspective that a lot of folks see an NBA team and they think international, huge mega business. In my mind, coming from Turner Broadcasting to the Hawks, we're a mom and pop for all intents and purposes. While we do have players who are, you know, playing on grand stages and may have great salaries, at the end of the day, sports teams are still operated as individual businesses on their own, even though we're a part of the league. And so with that, everyone wears a lot of hats, myself included. And so I have around 9 direct reports currently. And so I have an amazing team. They're probably around 75 to 80 in full across all of the organizations that report into marketing. And to be honest, we don't do a ton of agency work. We may freelance out a project here and there, mainly on the creative side. So we have a pretty small Hawk Studios team, which is our creative and graphics, as well as all of our video content. So if we have some big projects coming up, we may freelance out parts of it, but we haven't necessarily worked in an agency way in quite a while. And I think a lot of that is bringing in a lot of talent and skills internally so that we can kind of create our own internal agency. But, you know, to be honest, we have a lot of support. And I think the good parts of it is we can schedule outside of pandemic. We know the season, you know, we know when it's all-star break, we know when it's summer league, we know when it's lottery, we know when it's draft. And so we can ramp up or ramp down depending on the season. Obviously with the season being suspended earlier this year, it's been a little bit of a monkey wrench. And so we're learning a lot on the fly. And I do marketing, not just for the Hawks, but also for State Farm Arena. So that includes working with every promoter that's coming in for every arena show or event in our building, as well as working with the arena on finding specialized, unique ways that we can monetize the building. So that could be movie. We do a lot of shoots. People shoot music videos and, you know, movie scenes in the arena all the time, or have large meetings for different, you know, events and things that are coming to town. So it's pretty broad and expansive, but I think we have a great team in place, and we do a lot of it.
Yeah, and being able to take on those different hats, to do both the strategy and the execution, to you know, be able to serve whatever challenge comes your way. I think I'm sure that's probably a critical component in the hiring process. You know, you probably just want people who are really good at a lot of things as opposed to excellent in one.
Yeah, and it depends, because I mean, depending on the role, if I'm looking for a great email marketer who knows Marketo, like I need you to know that, you know, so there are some things that are highly specialized, but on the flip side, it really just depends on the need and what gaps exist within the department. Because if we're trying to develop something that has a brand tone that's, you know, off color, then we may need to find someone who has experience in one of those sorts of brands. Where, you know, sports is pretty incestuous. There are a lot of people that have gone from sports team to sports team and may not know a lot about other types of businesses. And so we have brought a lot of people in from, you know, the retail world, folks from Target, people that worked at Universal and music, people that have worked for, you know, you name it, just different companies. And, you know, from a ticketing side, if I had a gap in my, you know, in my directs in terms of someone who understood ticketing, We bring
Yeah.
in someone from Ticketmaster who really gets that at a whole other level. And so I think because of that, we built a really strong team.
It's cool. Cool to hear. I see a question in the chat from Olivia, and I'm going to change it up a little bit. So she's asking how your team and strategy has adapted during COVID. I wonder how you've been able to drive growth of a sports team during this time.
Well, it depends on how you define growth. So
I
our business is a live event business in an indoor venue. So in COVID times, obviously that has completely shifted. And so while we have, from day one, when our ownership team came on board, they said, you are a community asset. Before we're anything else, we are a community asset. And I really believe that through the pandemic, that has shined through more than anything. So from the very beginning, partnering with Emory Healthcare to feed workers on the front line, partnering with Gooder to go into the community and have pop-up grocery stores and, you know, the folks who are most food insecure in those neighborhoods, to even with senior citizens who couldn't leave the house for a while, doing grocery delivery to seniors. Most of my team really focused on community efforts right away, because that's what we knew was the important thing to do. So it wasn't a huge revenue driver, not at all. I mean, and that wasn't the intent. It was really, what can we do to really shore up our space, because we knew Atlanta needed us and we had the ability to help. And our ownership was really, really integral to that. In addition, every summer we do basketball camps and clinics all around the city. And that was really important for us. And for the first time in I don't know how many years, we weren't able to execute that. And so a team of folks who are managing part-time staff and basketball camps on a dime turned into a digital outlet where they created content, and they have been doing Hawks at Home on a virtual platform for the entire summer and are continuing now that school is remote, where we have weekly live sessions over Zoom. We've had almost every player come on board and be able to help, you know, craft the session with kids. And it's been amazing to see just how much our team has been able to play in the gray, as we say, and just be flexible in this really unique time. But I think it's important for our strategy to shift. And yeah, we're still selling tickets and ticket packages because we want to make sure that we are available whenever we do get the call to say, all right, you know, we're back in business. That's what it's going to be. But we don't know the timing of that, and the uncertainty that the world feels, you know, we feel it as well. But I do think that from a retail perspective, our retail sales have been amazing. And I was like, I guess e-com, a lot of people are home shopping, but the team is doing a great job right now. We're doing a mini camp that the league allowed us to do. So the team is still being able to play a little bit at our practice facility against each other for a short time, which has been great. But, you know, it's a really interesting time.
And it sounds like top down, bottom up, being a community asset is really at the heart of the Hawks. Like that sounds to me, the true to Atlanta, it sounds, and just through some other things, I'm sure there's probably other examples. So you talked about food insecurity issues with Gooder. I know we've got a ton of fans on the line with Jasmine and her team. But are there other ways that you talked about a few, but I know that there's some things that State Farm Arena is doing around voting and hiring the first D&I officer. I mean, would love to hear a little bit more there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in being a community asset, that means a lot of different things. And having the first head of D&I within our organization was critical. And I think a lot of our business evolved from that. But, you know, voting at State Farm Arena is one of the things that I could have never in a million years imagined we would be able to do. Traditionally, we would be booked with shows or events, but we're really excited about, you know, what we're able to do with early voting starting October 12th in our building, which is 100% the way we talk about it. It's a library on steroids. It's not coming in and having the DJ and the full game experience. We're really a voting precinct, and every employee is being trained on how to run a ballot box. And, you know, we designed cool new stickers that are different than any other voting place in Atlanta, where it's our peach basketball. And we even created future voter stickers for kids that want to come and have that experience with their family. But it all goes back to our next generation Atlanta strategy. How do we really position ourselves as a community asset and for the next generation? And we know that this year more than ever, you know, voting is critical. And so we have this new campaign that we've been running. We're in a competition against the Golden State Warriors. It's called Voters Win. So I need everyone to text Hawks to 26797 so that we can keep our, thank you. So we can keep our John Lewis Good Trouble Trophy. We've won the first 2 quarters, and we think, hey, man, it's Atlanta. We got to win this. But, you know, all the different ways that we're really trying to encourage you to get more involved, understand what they need to do, education on voting in general. whether you come to vote in our arena or not. It's only for folks who are within Fulton County specifically. But we just recognize the importance and the role that we have with our team and our players and our head coach, who's been incredibly vocal.
Yeah. So early voting, October 12th. Everyone's going to be there. Bring your kids, their stickers. Text Hawks to 26797, right?
Yes,
so that we can continue to beat the Golden State Warriors. And then I also see some other things in the chat. I want to also tie in, it sounds to me too, like your personal North Star vision, values, that's very clear. And it seems like with your North Star, I'm curious, and I think that we're all making the connection here on how some of that shows up and what this means for building a brand for a sports team. There are some connections there, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that aside from the community asset piece and being true to Atlanta. Is there any other plays there?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that for the Atlanta Hawks, and people always say, like, what is your brand interject with the Hawks brand? And I think I'm a leader of that and the steward of that brand, but by no means is the Atlanta Hawks Melissa Proctor.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a thing at all. But I do think the ideas and the values of creativity that we inject are 100% there. Our Peachtree campaign and some of the ways in which we approach that from last season was really differentiated. And I think a lot of that just came from like, no, let's not do it this way. Let's think about new ways to do that. But as we continue to navigate in this, current world, we're always looking for new opportunities. The main thing within my team is good ideas can come from anywhere. It's not around who's at what level, where in the organization. Steve Koonin, our CEO, says oysters make pearls when they're irritated. And so we have a lot of folks who are like, well, what about this? And what about that? And I think internally I have the mantra of steel sharpens steel. And so by really allowing the team to work with each other, and I think collaboration through the pandemic has been, it's on 10. Like for a team that we would all sit in different floors and it was so challenging, now we're all at home, can't see each other. And I think we're collaborating better than we ever have before. And it's amazing, but it's almost like, you have to take that extra step in order to do that. I really believe that as we move to next season and the future, we're only going to continue to get better.
That's awesome. I'm taking some notes here if you see me with my head down.
No worries.
Laying so many good golden nuggets here. So and speaking of some things related to the Hawks, we had a question earlier from Coulter around the role of retail of licensed products in the Hawks for marketing and sales. Any hits there?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we see, it's funny. When I initially got into the organization, our merchandising team was not a part of marketing. They were operated separately because they have their own P&L and they managed it in a different way. And when I became CMO, we brought it into the marketing team in a different way than we had before. And I really think it was critical because we really see merchandise as another lever for marketing in new and unique ways that we've been able to do things. So for example, our head coach, Coach Pierce, was doing something with the Georgia Innocence Project last year. He was very passionate about it. And he would participate in their events and really be a champion for the work they were doing. And I said, hey, why don't we look at meshing this with our retail group? And so we put together a GIP bundle that had a hat and a shirt and a bracelet that talked about the story of what it is they were doing and how they were really helping exonerees. And it was awesome just in having that lever that now Coach could be out there wearing his shirt and talking about what this is, but almost creating more value around it, where other people that were in line with that can now also wear it and support it much in the same way. And I think, our retail team is run by an amazing woman, Amy Serino, who has taken it to the next level, who's also very fashion forward. And I think of all the teams in the NBA, we have some of the more cutting edge designs and looks, which from a brand perspective, when I first got to Atlanta, people weren't wearing Hawks gear in the way that they are now. And I do think, between the brand that we've developed, looking at that next generation, partnering with local influencers, we've been able to take it up a notch, but it's absolutely a great business within itself. We got our first retail truck this past season, which has been awesome. But at the same time, it's a tremendous lever for the brand and also a great litmus test. When I see a lot of folks wearing it, I know we're doing something right.
So true. Atlanta's known for that, for sure. And I feel like everywhere, there's always someone or some kid even like wearing, which a kid is someone, but you know what I mean? I think that it's a good sign that you're doing the right things. Yeah. I want to bring it back. I want to bring it back to your book. I'm curious if you could share with the group. We've got a little less than 15 minutes left, and really just, I know that's been a journey for you, and was hoping you might be able to open up a little bit about what that process meant for you, and
Yeah,
part of, some of those key pieces that you were able to reflect on.
absolutely. Well, the book is called From Ball Girl to CMO. And initially, I would speak a lot, through my job with the Hawks and in other roles. And people would always say, when are you going to write a book? Your story is so fascinating. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, I don't know. I've never had a desire to be an author. My mom passed away a couple of years before my daughter was born. And I realized after I had my daughter, there were so many questions that I had for her. Like, how did she do this? What did she think of certain things? And so it got me thinking, like, I really just want to put my journey down for my daughter to have. So, God forbid something happens to me, at least she would be able to know more around what I've experienced, what I did, and not just hear it through other people, because I got a lot of hearsay about my mother. And so I started a blog on Medium, and I was like, well, one day she can look in the internets and find it, and that would be that. And then one day I had a chance meeting, a lunch with a woman named Renita Bryant from Mind Matters Publishing, which is a local publishing company. And we got to talking, and she was like, hey, I'd love to work with you on your project if you're really interested in making it a book. And I think that was the first time it ever became real. And so we sat down and talked about it. And then I said, okay, well, I'm going to write a chapter a month. And after the first year, I think I wrote 2 chapters because it just wasn't a part of my day-to-day or my worldview. I had the desire, but it wasn't my priority. And so, she said, well, we have a team that can help you if you really want to get this moving. And so I partnered with her and her team a little bit more and kind of doing interviews and pulling it out. And it was really a lot of work. But honestly, when the pandemic hit and I was home, and she was like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I'd love to finish it sometime this year. And I think it just gave me a lot of time to kind of focus, to think about, what was going on, to even the idea of, book pricing. I had never thought about that, or how do we break it into chapters or writing a synopsis. It was much more involved than I think I took for granted in my mind. If I knew the work up front, I don't know if I would even have a book right now, but I'm glad that I didn't, because I think it all worked out in the way that it's supposed to. And so on September 14th is when it officially launched. And yeah, I'm very, very proud that it's done. People are like, when is the next one? I'm like, I'm just glad this one is done. So
Yeah, add it to your toolbox of different things you're able to do and
yeah,
participate.
totally.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really neat. There was a question from Russ earlier. Any influential books for you, either in writing your own story or just otherwise? I'm sure there's probably a ton, but.
Well, it's interesting because during the time that I was contemplating my book, Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, came out, and I read it. And then I also went to the event at the arena when she spoke about it. And it was so awesome. And I was like, wow, I don't think my book would be all of that, because obviously there was a ton of experience and things that she had done. But I think it definitely kind of shaped a little bit of wanting to tell more of a memoir, not just a straight business book, in that combination. And then there have been a lot of people that I know who've written books. And so I think some of it is just asking questions and wanting to learn, and, inspiration from everywhere. But this one was way more about just trying to get my story out.
I hear you. That's awesome. You can buy it on Amazon, everyone.
Yep. And on my website, just make sure.
Oh, and your website?
Yep, melissamproctor.com, because there's information there on the book and links, but then also it has some of my artwork. So anyone's interested in seeing some of the art that I've produced, throughout my life, it's there as well. So just a little bit more info.
I love that. I already purchased a copy, by the way, but I gave it to a girlfriend. So yeah. So yeah, of course. We have a few other questions in our time remaining.
Cool.
I know the flow is kind of going all over the place, but it's kind of how my brain works.
I love it.
Yeah. So thanks for coming on the ride. So we've got Charlie asking some basketball questions. If you'd like to answer, you can.
Cool.
There's assuming you only have one, which provides more ROI, championship or having one of the few superstars in the league on the team.
Ooh, Charlie, that's a hard question. And it's a hard one because in Atlanta, we've never had a championship. We've had when we were the St. Louis Blackhawks before the team moved to Atlanta. And so we do get some props of having a championship, but obviously it wasn't in the city. And I would say for championship teams, that's a big deal. But I would think from a day-to-day ticket sales perspective, having that superstar, the league is a superstar-driven league. So if I had my choice, and this is a tough one because I've always wanted a ring, I'd probably go with the superstar based on ROI, which was your question, because I know that we would probably be able to sell out every game for people wanting to come and see a LeBron play, night after night. And that's huge. So even without a championship, I think this city, Atlanta, more than any other city, talks about Dominique because he was the superstar. Trae Young is a superstar in his own right. And I think we're grooming a lot. John Collins, we're doing a great job, but I do think that helps to take it up a notch, especially in this city.
Cool. Charlie also
Tough
asked.
question.
I know. Well, here's an even tougher one. I think Charlie also asked, who do you have?
Charlie?
I know, Charlie P. Charlie P. He asked, or Charlie, I don't know if you're a female or a male, but who do you have winning the finals? I said he, so I just wanted to make sure gender pronouns was clear there.
Charlie, and inside, I'm from Miami originally. So in my heart, I'm like, it would be so cool if the Heat win. However, the LeBron factor of the Lakers and them coming back for a championship, like that's going to be, I hope it's a good series. But I want to say I'm rooting for the underdog of the Heat. That's what I want to say.
Okay. It's the South Florida in you.
It's the South Florida in me.
I feel you on that.
But if the Lakers win, I'd be like, oh, well, I mean, it's the Lakers.
Awesome. So a few more. There is a question around, Charles Minifield, who is Charlie P., agrees with both answers.
Thank you.
Yeah. There is a question around how your team identifies and selects community efforts that the Hawks end up supporting.
What's awesome is when I first started with the Hawks, we were all over the board. And if anybody asked what the Hawks or the Hawks Foundation did in the community, I don't know if anyone would be able to define it. And so we really retooled our strategy and we said, we're going to be about building bridges to the community through basketball. And it was the most amazing filter or guiding principle we ever developed for our business because it was a very easy no if we weren't supporting other organizations that weren't about basketball. So we can only be famous for one thing in this city. So the reason why we have Hawks at Home, why we did all of our community courts, if you've seen in different neighborhoods around the city that we've invested money into redoing the courts so kids had safe places to play. We've partnered with State Farm and created good neighbor clubs in association with those courts. So if we had to do any indoor programming, we could utilize those locations. But the idea for our filter is building bridges to the community through basketball. So, partnering with Vision to Learn where kids can come out and get their eyes tested, with schools or local playgrounds and then get glasses from the Hawks so they can see so that they're able to play, donating equipment to different schools and community centers so kids can have, basketballs and basketball racks, a lot of those things, but that's where our efforts go. And then on the other side, we kind of have our moments that were necessary. And I do think that the pandemic provided some of that where, the idea of food insecurity, while it's not a building bridges through basketball, it was way more around our community asset piece of where we were needed at that particular time.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Two more questions for you, Melissa. There was a question from Jennifer, who's a good friend of 352. And I wanted to save this one for almost last because I have a feeling that there are some really great pieces here. She asks, do you find that women are rare in your position in the NBA or are you a rarity? And if you perceive yourself as a trailblazer?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. When I first got into the league in high school, I would say that there were not a lot of women at all, in this role. Now I do think, especially in the marketing realm, there are a lot of women who are running marketing for various teams around the league. Still majority men, but more and more. When I go to league meetings, I see more and more women, and it's so awesome just to see even the diversity of people that are coming into the league. And I know the NBA is one of the most forward-facing leagues in the way that they're approaching their businesses, even in terms of ownership, senior leadership, on the basketball and the business side, which is great. I think I'm a rarity with having the creative background because I don't think there's a lot of folks that are in creative or have an entertainment background either. A lot of people that I see around the league have worked in sports mostly their entire career. And they may have been there for 25 years and are now running marketing for the team. And so I do think I'm a little bit different in what I bring to the table. And I consider myself a trailblazer. That's a tough one. I'm not really a trailblazy kind of chick, but I would assume so in other channels. And I have no problems kind of saying the difficult things and having the conversations others don't want to have in order to help make things better. But I do realize that I'm a work in progress as well and still growing on a regular basis. One quick example is when I was at the Hawks and I got promoted to CMO, I had a really small office on our floor. And I loved my office. It was right in the direction of where I lived, so I can see traffic every day and know when I need to leave. And a big corner office opened up. And they said, hey, Melissa, now that you got promoted, you got to move to the corner office. And I didn't want to do it because I was comfortable and I liked where I was. And then a junior level person came in and talked, and she was just like, wow, I don't believe it. All the guys have the corner offices. And it struck something in me. And I said, wow, while I don't deviate and I'm very true to who I am, I also have to recognize that in leadership, there are people watching me, and everything that I do, is either going to inspire someone or help inform them of what to do or not to do. So I ended up going and taking this office as much as I didn't want to, but I was the only woman with a corner office within the organization. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the gravity that had to show me as equal in parity. And I'm not an office-based kind of, like, none of that matters to me. But I realized that in me making that decision to move, what it did for the psyche and the mentality of other people to say, oh, wow, one day I can have a corner office too. And so I do think that when people ask, what I'm most proud of to be in this position for, I said, just being in it. I told Sarah the story of, when I go and park my car at the arena, sometimes we have reserved parking spaces and there would be security there, and I would park my car and they say, I'm sorry, ma'am, this space is reserved for executives. And I'd be like, oh, well, I have an executive. And they're like, oh, I need to see your badge. So I would show them and it says Hawks executive. And they'd be like, oh, okay, sorry. And every time that happened, it would make me so happy because I knew all I was doing was just breaking through stereotypes of what they envisioned as an executive for the Hawks looking like, which wasn't me, which is great. And so I really believe that you can't be what you can't see. And so when I meet with young girls or even young women of color and they're like, oh man, it's so cool that you're there, to me, that's all, like, that's why I'm here more than anything else, and why I wrote this book as well, just to hopefully inspire someone else. I mean, my daughter included, but I just think that part is so important because you almost lose sight of it. It's like the simplest thing right in front of you, but it's so impactful and meaningful.
This has been one of my favorite off the records. I'm so grateful for you. I know that we're coming up on time. I think in the chat, you can even see that you've made some bigger Hawks fans, but I would add some even bigger Melissa fans. So thank you for showing up. So beautiful, so powerful. There are a few key takeaways I just want to call out. And if there are any more builds to it, please feel free to add. The importance of relationship building. Do the job you want before you have it. Being true to yourself. You're here because of all that you bring to the table. Ask yourself, what capability am I adding to my tools? I remember too from a previous conversation and want to make sure I include it in just because I think it'll really resonate. From something your mom said, actually, that you shared with me, which I'm very grateful for, was around nothing meets a trial but a failure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Loved that one. And then also, what's the legacy you're leaving behind? I would say a pretty strong one. So anything else that you would love for the group to have?
No, I just, just thank you all. Yeah. Just go out, pay it forward, make it awesome. That's it. Life's too short, man. We got to live it up every day.
Totally agree. Thank you, Melissa. Genuinely. So insightful, so real. Appreciate you bringing your full self to today's conversation and the work you do every day. We need more people like you. I've said that before and I'll say it again. Hope you can come back soon. And I also want to share for the crowd that we'll be posting this webcast to YouTube and sending the link with a recap to everyone today. But if you're cool with it, I'd also love to add at Melissa M. Proctor. Feel free, LinkedIn, Instagram, buy your book on Amazon, do the thing, support.
Yes. Hit me on the gram. That's it. Instagram is it, at Melissa M. Proctor. Because now I'm like, oh man, people are talking to me and I can talk back. So, I'm looking for you.
Well, and now that you have your cool new headshots too. So awesome. Anything else on your end? Okay.
Thank you guys so much for coming and for paying attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.